ought to be in pictures. You're wonderful to see. You ought to be in pictures.
Hello, welcome to Deep Dive Movie Reviews with my friend Steve Hackman and myself, James Marsh. This week, we're doing things a little bit differently. We are looking at the 2017 Japanese film, Tremble All You Want.
Hey, but before we begin, if you haven't already subscribed to Deep Dive Movie Reviews, it would be a great favor to us if you went ahead and hit that subscribe button. And while you're there, just ding that little bell next to it so you're notified every single time we upload a new review. And just as a reminder, Deep Dive Movie Reviews does contain spoilers, so you've been warned. James?
Yes, so 2017's Tremble All You Want from Akiko Ohku. This is, as I said, a little bit different. It's a film that did come out a few years ago in Japan, actually premiered at the Japanese International Film Festival. But it is being released in the US on KANI Releasing, a new boutique label run by a couple of friends in Hong Kong, just to be absolutely transparent, and available exclusively at vinegarsyndrome.com. The Blu-ray is out now. It is right here. And they very kindly sent us a copy so we could have a look at it and share our thoughts. So Tremble All You Want is the story of a young girl called Yoshika. She's 24 years old. She works in the accounts department of a big company. And she has been holding a torch for her high school sort of sweetheart, if you like, a boy in her class that she refers to as Ichi, or the one. Ever since they were in school together, you get the kind of impression that he didn't really know that she even existed. She was a very timid, shy, reclusive girl, like drawing cartoons of him. And she now lives a sort of similarly solitary existence, although she does seem to pour her heart out to literally anybody anywhere close to her that will listen. The old lady on the bus, the guy who works at 7-Eleven, the old man fishing where she leaves her bike, you know, literally anybody and everybody. She's got a friend, a colleague at work who she confides in a little bit. And then crashing into her life comes another guy that she quickly calls number two, who is a colleague, a sort of clumsy, awkward colleague, who immediately has the hots for her. And so she has to decide whether she's going to pursue a sort of a potentially real relationship with two, or whether she is going to chase, try and find, try and locate, try and track down once and for all her one true love. So I think that's about the size of it.
I think that's the gist of it. You know, James, I thought, hey, who of us doesn't have that little flame that we remember from high school or middle school? You know, that girl, in our case, that girl that, you know, just lit up whenever they smile. They lit something up, and you always think, whatever happened to that person, you know? And these days with Facebook, you can actually kind of figure out what happened to them. But I love how this movie just kind of playfully entertains the what if this person, you know, and it's a little bit of a stretch that this person's been able to keep this flame going well into the professional life. But this is the nature of the protagonist character, in that she's a very much a loner, that she lives in her own world with her own imaginations. And, you know, as you said, that then along comes the real thing. I think this movie does a good job of playfully exploring the fantasy land that we sometimes live in versus the real, which is right before us, and the decisions we need to make about living in the fantasy dream world, or with maybe some of the imperfections of the reality in front of us. And number two is full of imperfections.
Well, that's absolutely true.
He threw up on the first date because he was too drunk, and somehow she's still stuck around. So
yes, she deserves a medal for that. Absolutely. This is the first film from Akiko Ohku that I have seen, but I really like her kind of style where you know, she takes the mundane, the everyday, and she gives it this kind of little twist of perspective. She adds a little sort of kooky, fantastical energy to it. I mean, there's a moment about halfway through the film where Yoshika just breaks into song. And you know, it comes at kind of a revelatory moment for the audience, because you realize that actually what we've been watching for the first half of the film isn't 100% true. You know, we have been watching her, as I was saying, literally talking, discussing her life, discussing her daily problems with all of these kind of strangers and yet familiar figures in her world. You know, the old man who fishes, the strange old lady who lives next door playing her ocarina all day long. And what you discover is she hasn't been talking to any of those. She wishes that she had been. She's actually got nobody. There's actually nobody that she's been talking to.
All of her relationships exist solely in her mind. And
that's right.
We quickly are reminded that actually there is no umbilical relationship to any of these people, it's almost sad because they were such quirky people. I wanted to know more about those people's lives because they were wonderful, eccentric. I was even wondering if the person next door, if he was transgendered. There was such interesting characters in this film. And I thought one of my small critiques that I have of the film is I would have loved to have more humorous interaction with them. And then sometimes it just didn't happen.
Yeah, I think that then it's only in the second half that you realize why, perhaps, and it's because none of it was actually happening at all. But and she has this obsession with extinct animals and fossils and ammonites, and she buys an ammonite from like a museum yard sale kind of thing, and she has it on her wall. And the song that she sings at this halfway point is essentially claiming that she is one of these ammonites, that she is a fossil. We discovered that she's a virgin; she's never even been kissed, and so she's been kind of left on the shelf, if you like this fossil. But she is scared of going extinct herself, if you like. You know, like all of these connections that she has with the outside world are fake. You know, they're just in her head, and that it's almost like nobody knows that she exists even. And she's worried about dying in obscurity and in anonymity. And so I really liked that kind of angle to it, you know, and I really liked Mayu Matsuoka's performance. I think she was actually nominated for a Japanese Oscar for best actress for this role, which is rare to see. I mean, certainly in the Oscars in Hollywood, it's very rare to see a sort of comedic performance, you know, a rom-com performance get recognized. But I think it's one thing I really like about Japanese cinema, and it's always been true, is that they have way more stories about women than I think any other industry, certainly more than Hollywood. Hollywood's getting better now. There's been this real push for diversity and inclusion and what have you lately, and representation. Japan's always been really good. It's always had more, you know, more and more stories where the protagonist is a woman or a schoolgirl or whatever, and it's just normal. And it's not kind of the they haven't had to make it a thing in order for it to have that kind of representation on screen, and this is definitely one of those films.
Well, I want to see more films by the director Akiko Ohku, I believe her name is. I watched the the interview that I had with her as a supplement to the film, and you know, she even states at one point she doesn't like to think about genre when she said the first thought is people saying, oh, you're making a rom-com. I don't want to be thinking and seeing everything through the lens of I've got to do this through the lens of a romantic comedy. And although arguably this film is a romantic comedy, there are elements of it where you can see where she's exploring with different genres and different, you know, she's coloring outside the lines a little bit, and I appreciated that in this film.
Yeah, it really feels like she's breaking the rules. You know, she's ripping up the rule book and doing it her way, and I think that's where the film works best, because you know, for work, I end up having to, these are the kind of movies that I end up having to cover and review for the paper quite a lot. And there are a lot of them, and they're incredibly similar. And some of the sort of the dating rituals, if you like, in a lot of these films are different to how they are in sort of Hollywood rom-coms or British rom-coms. And I know you're a big fan of British rom-coms. Like there are a lot more chaste, for one thing, pure, innocent. You know, there's very little, particularly in the high school ones, there's very little physical interaction. Holding hands is a huge deal, you know, that comes late on. And there's this other thing that comes up in this film as well, about calling people by their first names. It's just not something that you do unless you're very intimate with somebody or they're a family member or something like that. And so that sort of thing kind of comes into play, and from a Western perspective it can easily look kind of silly or childish or trivial or even frustrating, you know, when you're supposed to be getting to the big part, or the relationship is just moving too slowly. narratively as a result, but this is just the way it is.
Yeah.
And you realize as the story goes on that this is that Yoshika is actually kind of a victim of this. She has, been holding this torch for this guy that doesn't know she exists for so long, that her love life has just failed to materialize because she has failed to, take the first step with anybody or to even pursue anybody. And so here she is now in her mid-20s, and yeah, she's never had a partner. She's never been with anybody.
And when she finally orchestrates to arrange the fantasy romance in her life, inevitably she's disappointed because the fantasy can never measure up to the reality. And so then she has to kind of double back onto number 2, each knee.
Yeah.
And knee. I do love how they call them Ichi and knee, like 1 and 2. And although I have to admit there's, and I don't know if it's just the different cultural differences in the West and Japan, but I just thought the first date is so bumbling, and this guy is like, there's almost no redeeming qualities in this guy at first. He kind of grows on you at the end. You can kind of see this there's the potential for this real mature person, but he even admits at one point, I can't even think about marriage because I'm so immature. One day I'll be more mature, I can think about this. He knows that he's wholly immature. And so I mean I can appreciate that, but I did struggle at times thinking, would this girl really have entertained even going out with this guy? Because he's such a fool. He's such an idiot at first. But then I started thinking, is this merely a cultural, like, do the audiences in Japan, respond to this? I don't know. You're more familiar with it than I am.
I mean, yeah, it's a fairly familiar trait. I mean, he is a bit of an idiot for sure. And I think the film is as much about her realization that her life is passing her by, and that she's missing out on these opportunities. It's a big deal to her when he sort of comes out and says, that I like you. And she realizes that not only did Ichi never say that, he never really said anything to her. When she finally does see him again, he doesn't even kind of really remember her at all. And I think that, it slowly dawns on her that that's fantasy and this is a reality. And although he's a bit of an idiot, he is kind of a lovable idiot.
He's a lovable idiot. He grew on me at the end. After that first date, I was really irritated. This guy's just a buffoon. There is just nothing. I mean, any guy who acts the way he does and then throws up, and he's just there would be no second date.
I wouldn't call him back. That's for sure.
No. And
but I think she also kind of identifies with sort of weird and strange people and animals. I think that's where her fascination for like dodos and other extinct creatures comes from. She likes those weird old creatures that were once walking the earth but no longer do. And maybe she sees a bit of that in him as well.
Yeah, indeed. Well, James, before we review and we go to our final score, and we talk a little bit about the people who brought us this film, I just wanted to say that I found Mayu Matsuoka. I understand why she's a breakout star. I think my heart gave a little flutter every time she smiled. She just has that quality about her, and she was the perfect choice for this film. And she had just that nuance of, she could, with just a look on her face, look in her eye, tilt of her face, she could just communicate so much of her emotion because she's living inside of her head. And so in order to project that, the word whimsy kept coming to mind. I kept thinking about Bayduna in Air Doll.
Sure.
And not that these films are that similar, but I thought the whimsy that both characters had, this free-spirited, both of them have this whimsical nature about them. And I thought Mayu Matsuoka is just a delight to watch. And I'm looking forward to seeing some future projects by her. Although I also see that Shoplifters, which you have recommended to me before, by the Japanese director, is it Hayuka?
Hirokazu Koreeda. Hirokazu.
Yeah. Here, I'm going to get these names right. I had the Koreeda. I had Koreeda. I had Koreeda down.
Yeah,
I had Koreeda down. Got to get the first name. But yes, that's a movie that is on my list to see very, very soon.
Yeah, no, I think that's something that we should get to. But yeah, Mayu Matsuoka is just what makes this film work.
No.
You know, her two love interests, you know, they're both recognizable Japanese stars, and you know, they've done their fair share of sort of pin-up heartthrob kind of high school movies and what have you. But the film makes, you know, lives or dies on her performance. And
Yeah.
you know, you spend so much of the movie just looking at her face. You know, the film, so much of the film is just kind of seems to be shot in sort of medium or close up, just of her.
It's just yes, yeah.
And she's got just one of these sort of unassumingly beautiful faces. You know, it's not. I don't think it would stop traffic, but once you're spending a bit of time looking at it, you do just kind of get sort of lost in her eyes a little bit. And she's, yeah, you know, she's a somewhat slightly frustrating character, but just in a fairly sort of just got quite an adorable way. And so you do really kind of warm to her. And even though she's a bit of a weirdo and a bit quirky and a bit of her own worst enemy sometimes, you know, she gets in her own way, and she's the one depriving herself of happiness more than anything else. But they're just watching those scenes of her just potter about in her apartment doing nothing, you know, doing the dishes and eating noodles and listening to her headphones, whatever. You're just like, yeah, I could watch you do this all day.
Yeah, absolutely. Although at the end, she has her own little crazy moment, and then I thought, oh, you and Neil get along, because actually he's a little less crazy than you are, because she just kind of loses it. She flies off the handle. It's almost like she's been bottling things up for 2 hours,
right?
And then it just all comes out, and half of it makes no sense whatsoever. And the guy's watching her, you know, Nee, the number 2, the real guy, is watching her just spew, and she's just all kinds of accusations and, you know, real and imagined slights and all kinds of craziness just comes out. And then he just says, I kind of like you, you know. And it's like she just fell at that moment. She's like, okay, anybody that can put up with my crazy and still like me is a keeper. So yeah, it's a delightful film.
Yeah, and that's what it's all about at the end of the day, isn't it? It's finding that person that can, you know, see past your faults, put up with all your idiosyncrasies and all your flaws, and stay, you know, see past them. And it's about her coming to that realization for herself and doing it for herself as well. I think it's about her accepting who she is, accepting herself for who she is, and accepting the reality of her future. And it's like a lot of these Japanese films, it's a little bit too long. They do just tend to be a little bit too long for me. You know, they're always at least 2 hours long, and I think it's just the nature of the format, because a lot of them are shot quite low budget, almost like for TV, and a lot of the TV studios actually make this kind of movie. So it almost feels like it should be a couple of episodes of a TV show rather than a film. And I think that's why they tend to kind of run 2 hours plus, when it could easily be a like 90-minute movie.
It's a good thing Mayu Matsuoka. It's a good thing Mayu Matsuoka is adorable to watch, because it's true. Watching her cook noodles or vacuum the house or clean or whatever, I could have easily seen in the editing room there could have been 10 to 15 minutes dropped out of this film, and they wouldn't have lost anything. But like you said, this is the nature of the beast, and it seems to be a tendency these days that movies are getting more bloated, they're getting longer, and I don't know. I think stronger editing choices at times need to be made. This film is hardly the biggest culprit of. I know what you mean. I mean, this is not the hill on which to have this fight, I think. I mean, one of the things I did like about the film were all the little kind of cultural moments. You know, where when they go off into the countryside, you know, they go on this like fishing trip, and they go off into the mountains at one point, and they're ringing the bells and doing all these little moments where they don't even really dwell on it for very long. And then one bit that I found kind of interesting, which I don't really think I've seen before, but was like nap time at work. Oh, I'm glad you brought that up. That's yes.
You know, it's like after lunch, all the women go into like this locker room, and then it's like lights out, and they have like a power nap before the afternoon session. There's a beautiful shot from overhead where all their phones come on at the same time, all their alarms go off at the same time, and I thought that was really well done. And little bits like that where you're like, you get what's happening, but you're kind of
Yeah.
like, okay, that's interesting. I've not seen that before, and I certainly have not experienced that before.
I found myself going, wow, that's just so weird that people would do that. And I thought, that's brilliant. I could really use a power nap after lunch at work. That's a great idea, actually.
Well, that's it. I mean, I've seen it in Hong Kong. I've worked in Hong Kong office culture before, and the number of people who just like their head is just down on their desk after
Yes.
lunch, like having power naps. But it almost feels in this movie like it's compulsory.
Yeah.
Like it's at kindergarten or something,
Yes,
and
yes.
you're
So
like, that's after lunch. We're going to
right.
play Sleeping Lions or something, and he's like, boom, put the whole class out for half an hour.
After cookies and milk, we're going to have a lie down now.
Yeah, and you can see that, if they try to do something like that at home, people will be just like, I'm going to go out for lunch. I'm not doing this. This is stupid.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just a very different kind of corporate world, corporate culture.
Yeah.
And it is interesting when she files for maternity leave. And when he doesn't give it to her, I mean, she's not pregnant, as she just needs to kind of, when he doesn't give it to her, she quits. And he's like, no, don't be silly, you're rushing things. You've got another couple of years left in you yet. And then you can get married and go off, which is very much part of this sort of Japanese corporate world, is that, the women will get a job as much as anything else to try and, to meet a guy and then get married and then quit and go home and have kids.
Well, it was another comical part of the film too, because her anger at number 2 is that she thinks that he is just valuing her virginity. So as her like, F you, I'm pregnant.
And it makes no sense. Everyone's
it
like,
doesn't.
What?
What? Who's the father? It's none of your business. It's but yeah, just it's a delightful film. James, before we go into a score, did you want to mention some of the other films by KANI?
Yeah, I just wanted to give them a little shout out, as they were kind enough to facilitate us. So yeah, it's run by a couple of people from Hong Kong, but it's a US label. Available, Tremble All You Want is available exclusively from Vinegar Syndrome. They have a number of partner labels at Vinegar Syndrome, and each title is launched exclusively there, but then is later available on Amazon or wherever you buy your Blu-ray discs. And so I think they've got about 4 or 5 other titles out now, a couple of Japanese films like Being Natural from 2018 and Videophobia from 2019. So, and more of these sort of indie Japanese movies covering a variety of genres. Also an old Filipino sort of action thriller called Cain and Abel from 1982. They also have given that probably its first ever Blu-ray release, and that you can pick up at Amazon or wherever. But they're doing great work. They're shining a spotlight on films that definitely, for the most part, I haven't even heard of, and I cover quite a lot of this kind of films. But they are making these available English friendly with exclusive special features, interviews, like you said, as well. And I think it's great that people are still putting in the extra hours, going the extra mile to get these films that would otherwise just, disappear under the radar, giving them a platform.
I'm sure we can leave a link in the description below.
Absolutely. Yes, we will do that as well. So to their website, and also to where you can buy their products. And yes, thank you again to KANI releasing for letting us see the film.
James, wrapping this up, what are we going to use as a tool, an instrument of measure for
well, I thought surely ammonite fossils.
Well, there we go. Because that's what we can afford. We couldn't afford the Nipponites, but we can afford the ammonites.
There you go.
There we go.
So, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, sure. Like I said, I found this a delightful film. It's not without its quirks and little things, but by and large, I enjoyed it. I can recommend it. I thought it was a delightful performance by Mayu Matsuoka, and I just will give this 3.5 ammonite fossils out of 5. Go see it.
Absolutely. I mean, like I said, this is the kind of film I see a lot of, and this one does stand out. It has a quirky sensibility to it. I think Akiko Ohku's authorial authorship, should we say, that her directorial sensibility is interesting, is unique. It does make the difference. I mean, as we've said, that she breaks out into song spontaneously, and she has completely fantastical fictitious relationships with the people that she sees day after day on the street. And we all have these people in our life that we don't know them at all, but it's the guy who works at the place, and the guy who's always looking there, the guy who's always on the same bus as you, or the woman who's always walking home when you're walking to work, or everybody, you have these people in your life. And I think it was a sort of ingenious little bit of creativity to have those be the important people in her life, who she shares with. Although then it turns into a kind of a fairy tale. And then Mayu Matsuoka is just great. I think she really is. And so, as I don't give halves, because I think this probably is a 3.5 star movie, I will give it 4 stars. Four ammonite fossils.
There you go. Fantastic. Well, that's our opinion, but what is yours? Let us know what your thought is on Tremble All You Want. You can leave your thoughts in the description box below. Also, James and I are on social media. You can find us on Instagram and as well as Twitter, and you'll find links to those where you can catch up with us there in the description box below. James?
Yes, that's right. If you're interested in watching Tremble All You Want, like I said, it's available exclusively at vinegarsyndrome.com, at least for now. If you have seen it, let us know what you thought. If you've seen other films directed by Akiko Ohku that you think that we would enjoy, please let us know in the description, and we will check those out as well. And until then, and we will put links in the description of where you can support KANI Releasing and other independent labels of that ilk. But until then, until next time, thank you very much.
You're wonderful
Bye-bye.
to see. You ought to be in pictures. Oh, what a hit you would be.